Esto nos alegra porque para la próxima sabemos que podemos tener un espacio más grande para, nada, seguir conectándonos todos los que hacemos Webflow, No Code, Figma, etcétera, todo lo que todos hacen acá. Y también gente nueva que se va sumando. Tenemos algunas personas que, nada, vieron, mismo Levagón que nos prestó el espacio para hacer el evento, también trajo gente. Entonces, la verdad es que estamos contentos de que como se juntan un montón de comunidades.
Sí, estamos muy contentos y también muy entusiasmados, porque esto también nos da la idea de decir, bueno, es el primero de este año, nosotros ya habíamos hecho uno en noviembre, una juntadita de Webflow Live Viewing, y éramos 15, 20, y bueno, de a poco pasaron un par de meses y somos un montón. Totalmente. Así que nos entusiasma también para el futuro hacer otro tipo también de eventos y de juntadas.
Nosotros, bueno, nos presentamos. Yo soy Pablo Flor, de Edgar Allan, que es una agencia de Webflow de Atlanta, y tiene un equipo acá de 7 personas en Argentina. Y nada, un poco la idea de Edgar Allan es armar la comunidad de habla hispana, latinoamericana de Webflow, y por eso un poco nos ayudan a organizar todo esto y está genial, así que de vuelta, súper contentos. La idea es cada 2, 3 meses, cuando quieran, también si alguno de ustedes nos quiere mandar mail, tienen nuestro contacto, che, podemos armar algo sobre este tema, tengo a alguien para dar un workshop sobre tal. La ocasión hoy es que está Raimar acá, que ahora en un toque lo vamos a presentar y va a dar el keynote, que vino de Estados Unidos. Muchos de ustedes lo conocen seguramente, ex CMO de FinSuite, tiene la comunidad State of Flow, y bueno, vino acá de visita y se nos ocurrió armar como algo hace 2 semanas y hicimos rápidamente todo, lo empezamos a promocionar hace una semana, así que de vuelta, súper contentos de eso, y en un rato arrancamos con el evento. Flor, ¿querés dar las recomendaciones de...?
Sí, un par de recomendaciones que no le van a servir a la gente que está mirando por el stream, pero bueno, esta sería como el área del evento sería esta. Si alguno necesita tomar una call o trabajar o hacer algo, les pedimos si pueden hacerlo en el pasillito de acá afuera, hay una mesita.
Hay una mesita ahí.
Llévense
su sillita porque estamos limitados de sillas, pero tienen que tomar un call o algo ahí o en la escalera mismo, pero arriba no, porque nada, es el espacio de coworking y la idea no es que subamos todos ahí y hagamos bardo arriba. Exacto. Así que nada, si pueden ir a la mesita de afuera o de acá afuera o a la escalera, y si no, afuera del coworking hay un café, si quieren salir ahí también, no hay problema. Lo único que no podemos usar es el piso de arriba, que es donde está la gente laburando. Baños
por aquí.
Wi-Fi, ya lo dijimos.
Wi-Fi está anotado acá y ahí hay, bueno...
Y ahí hay gaseosas, agua, café, medialunas, más tarde vamos a poner unos sanguchitos. Y la idea, nada, es el calendario brevemente. Ahora tenemos a Raimar que va a charlar. Después va a hablar la gente de Paisanos. Y después la gente que están ahí de Friends van a hacer un workshop. Así que tenemos 3 charlas con breaks de por medio y un juego que también inventó Raimar, que está copado. Si tienen ahí Webflow, Figma, qué sé yo, ahora me tomo un aplausito. Un jueguito que va a estar bueno, medio dinámico, para divertirnos un poco, que vamos a ver cómo sale. Así que eso también es parte del plan. Y después la idea es quedarnos acá, bajar unas cervezas que tenemos, etcétera, y nada, charlar hasta que nos echen. Y después nos vamos, si quieren seguirla, a otro lado también. Eso es todo, ¿no?
Sí, eso es todo.
Eso es todo.
Le damos la bienvenida a nuestro invitado.
Raimar.
Ok. Hola. Voy a tratar de hablar un poquito en español a empezar, pero voy a hacer el talk en inglés porque yo creo que no tengo el español así de bueno. Pero me encanta estar aquí y ver toda la gente que salieron para esto. Ellos dijeron que era 2 semanas de planning. So, veremos la próxima vez, a tener 2 o 3 meses para planear algo bien grande, si se puede hacer una conferencia con 100 o lo que sea acá abajo. So, se está creciendo la comunidad esta en Sudamérica, en Europa, en África, en donde sea, el mundo entero. La gente se está enterando de cómo se puede trabajar en las computadoras y estar donde quieras y todavía estar ganando dinero para poder vivir y hacer lo que quieras. So, I'm going to change to English now so that I can get comfortable. I didn't want to talk about specifically Webflow today or really any technology platform. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through a concept of technology fading. And I'm going to take you on like a journey of history of lots of technologies that have come and transformed society and then faded away. And we take them all for granted today. And the technologies we're building today will very soon fade away. And what happens in that moment? How do you take advantage of that? And how does that impact society as we go? Because as you'll see, these are trends that are kind of exploding all over. And it's very interesting to see how people are coming together to take advantage of all of this. So, when technology fades, vamos a empezar. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you have not. You see this with AI right now. ChatGPT is going crazy. We're seeing a lot of iterations, even Webflow sometimes. When you first learn Webflow, when you first learn to do these things, it feels like magic. It feels like something you've never been able to do, and now you can. And so new tech is often considered a novelty before it defines new standards. It's happened countless of times. We talked about this, what happens next. So let's start with fire. Fire was one of the first inventions by man. Okay, maybe they found it. Imagine taking a lighter today to a caveman and showing him a simple lighter. They would look at you like you're a god, right? So maybe they found fire through lightning strikes or through forest fires, and then it became a chore figuring out how do we create this, how do we transport this. But from that moment on, they had heat. They could operate at night a little bit. They could heat their food, right? So heating the food allowed the modern brain to form and allowed us to evolve as actual humans. But now, we take heat for granted, right? Nobody thinks about how to start a fire. Nobody thinks about any of this. Okay, but it's a major innovation. Agriculture, same way. We were hunter-gatherers, right? So for a long time, if you took somebody from 10,000 years ago and you took them into a modern grocery store, they would wonder, what the heck is this? How do you find all this food? How do you have access to all this food? How do you have this abundance? It'd be crazy. Okay, so this allowed for the growth of society, a growth of cultures, the growth of population exploded after this. Next comes transportation, right? So the wheel, very simple invention, but that leads to tons of different things. Boats, shipping cargo all over the world. Trains evolve. We put motors on these carts that horses pull, and eventually we have cars. And the idea of somebody coming from the United States to Argentina to do a talk or to vacation is crazy, maybe even 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it's crazy. But today, here we are, 10,000 miles away from home, doing a meetup with tons of people in a different country, and I think we're gonna see that airplanes shrink the world. Everything shrinks, right? So as these things grow, as these technologies, paradigms come, they shrink the world, they give us access, and soon we'll be taking for granted the idea that we're flying into space and that now we're chasing a dream of Mars. So again, major technology, nobody thinks about buying an airplane ticket, buying a train ticket, getting in their car and driving, but these things are major fundamental shifts. And if you go back to when they started versus where they are now, there's a big spectrum, right? Electricity, same thing. The world stopped at night with electricity. Now we all walk into a room, we flip on a light switch, we're all plugged in every day, we have these devices, we take it for granted. But these are huge technological leaps that at the time, this is only 300 years old, right? In the scale of humans, that's not that much. And we're gonna see these timelines start shrinking, right? From thousands of years to hundreds of years to the next one is decades, as we talk about communication, right? So think about the idea of sending a message from here to anywhere 500 years ago, 200 years ago, right? Even 100 years ago. Maybe you had the telephone, the telegram, you could send Morse code. It wasn't until less than 100 years ago that you could actually make a phone call and have real-time talk. Now we have video with television, I think in 1929, which is just 100 years ago. And now we're getting into computers and internet, and now we all communicate in real time, instantly, overwhelmingly. Too much communication, so you could say, right? Because it's become chaotic and it's become crazy. And so what we're starting to see is that as these technologies expand, they also create new behaviors in society that drive a bunch of change. We don't know what the changes that social media and instant communication and all of these real-time technologies are gonna have on us for another 10 or 15 years. We're seeing that some of them are very valuable. Some of them help us connect and build and grow. And then some of them turn us into angry mobs. And some of them have us fighting each other and getting mad because I see you disagree with me or for whatever reason. And so we have to learn how to navigate some of these technologies in interesting ways that we don't know how the impact will go over time. And then computation. So this leads us into the era we're in now, right? It started with a little abacus, counting, calculator by hand, and that evolved all the way to modern day supercomputers and parallel processing. We have all the way from, different, the starting of computer in 1822, the first mechanical computer, and then the evolution into what we have now, which is supercomputers, integrated circuits, microprocessors, speed up everything. And soon we have quantum computing. We have artificial intelligence that's growing, and parallel processing and technology that's just infinite data storage. You think about like an old floppy disk, 3.5 megabytes. Now your pictures your phone takes are hundreds of megabytes. And so the data is getting exponential. So all these things are leading to kind of exponential growth. So what does it all mean? It means that at every point, there's a major technological shift. Again, it's a novelty at the beginning, and then slowly it fades away. Slowly it disappears. And no matter what, at every step, you remove the technology, and what's left at the base layer? It's us, the people, right? And so what we're starting to see now, and this is why community is becoming explosive. This is why this is important. Because through these tools and through the way that the society has shifted, is we have to find new ways to empower the individuals, to build these communities, and to find a way to shift the value. One of the things we're going to talk about here in a second is how groups like this can shift the value exchange online and inside of working with each other to change the way we call something a currency, or the way we earn dollars, or the way we live and are able to work. As you can see, remote work is becoming prolific. So this is what we must optimize for. So as you're thinking about this new technology and you're thinking about how amazing this is, or how amazing Webflow is, or artificial intelligence, or whatever it is, always understand that the products you're building are in purpose of yourself and the people around you, or the people you intend to use the product. And so that's where you can really create significant impact. So at every step, the innovations have changed the world, but not at the moment of invention, like we talked about. It doesn't happen at the invention, right? It wasn't when the first caveman found fire that they knew how to control fire. It was after harnessing it, after learning how to use it, after learning how to spark it on your own. And now eventually you can flip a switch and your furnace is hot, right? And so it takes time for these things to kind of take over the zeitgeist, to reach their maturity. And where we're at right now is at the beginning of a paradigm shift, unlike anything we've ever seen, because all of these things are going to come together with the advancement of technology, with the advancement of these tools that are allowing us to build in ways that we have been limited before. And so these are the things that we have to figure out as individual creators in a modern world. How do we take this to the next level? Because you're at the front of a very big wave that's forming right now. You may think, oh, I'm not good as so-and-so agency, or my portfolio is not as big as it needs to be, or I don't have as many clients as I want, or I'm not making as much money as I want doing these things yet. But that's just the beginning. There's millions, more people than not don't even know what's happening in this space. They don't know about Webflow. They don't know about no code. They don't know about visual software development. They don't know about any of these things. They hardly know about what they see in the news. And so you guys are already on the front edge. So don't think that just because you're not exactly where you want to be yet, that you're not still ahead of essentially everyone. So let's talk a little bit about the future of work, because I think this is where we start getting interesting about what's coming here. I'm going to go through just some trends. The next few slides are trends and predictions that I think will take place over the next few years, specifically how they relate to the things we're working on. So first of all, this we're seeing already, distributed teams. This is not remote. This does not just mean remote. Remote's going to be a part of that, but I think the real powerhouses will come where you have, like what Edgar Allan's doing here, where they have distributed teams, but they have pods, right? So there's a density of people in one place doing something. It's not just that everyone's wherever they are, but you're able to access talent from different places and then create little ecosystems in those hubs. And those distributed little hubs give you the opportunity to do more than just one person on a remote team. So remote work will be a big part of it, but I think remote work will also fade away to this idea of a distributed little swarms of people working in small groups in interesting ways. Purpose-driven, like we're in a phase where people are kind of getting tired with the only thing that drives a business growth is profit. Right? People want to know a little bit about how they can make a difference in the world, how their work is impacting the people around them, how they can build community around the things that they do. We used to get a lot of community from our surroundings, but a lot of us work online. We work outside of big office settings. Maybe we're not all going to some office to work or some work site or whatever it is. And so how do you build community inside of those places is a big challenge. And that's going to lie at the core of a lot of future businesses. And I think what you'll see that the companies that get this are going to explode, and the ones that don't, obviously, are going to get left in the dust here. So let's talk about visual software development, because I think this is where we now start touching the front end of the internet. All right. We are building, and soon, like code has been a barrier, a huge barrier. When you talk about like, right, if we go back to the fire and the agriculture and the whatever, there was a beginning point, and then there's where we are now, where we take it for granted. Code started in 1948, I think, was the first program ever written. So here we are almost 100 years from that, and we still have code as a limitation. So there's still this arc, this path, and code's not going anywhere. But we are getting to the place where code is becoming abstracted enough that we, as creators, that people who don't understand code necessarily like at a semantic level, can still understand the logic, the function, what it does, and we can start building these things that the world will interact with, right? Everything else is going to disappear to an API, right? Everything's going to become language-based. You're going to be able to talk to the system. You're going to be able to do whatever, maybe even on the design side. But we will be the ones creating those experiences. It's never made sense to build software for small groups of people up until now, because you needed scale to make software make sense, right? So you needed millions of users to build a platform and to get enough traction to be able to make it financially make sense to run the servers, to run the people, to do the thing. That's no more. Now it makes sense to build software for 50 people, for 100 people, for 1,000 people. And what happens when you take the problem-solving skills that were once relegated to a small handful of people in Silicon Valley and distribute that potential across the world? I think we're starting to see it, right? With rooms like this filling up all over the world where people are saying, hey, I know the solution I need from this software. I don't need you to tell me how it should work. I want you to give me tools so that we can solve this problem at the ground level. That's a paradigm shift. And that's something that I think this whole no-code space, whether you're using Webflow, whether you're using Bubble, whether you're using Builder HQ, or any of these apps, this is what it's about. So the tools will continue to evolve. Front end as a service is an entire industry that I see evolving right now, right? Software as a service, we're all familiar with software as a service. Company offers software. They provide the backbone. Somebody licensed that software, and I can use that software to run my business. Okay, cool. What about a front end as a service? Could I somehow become someone who builds these front ends in whatever platform, let's say Webflow, and then attach that platform or sell that platform to somebody who has a data set? And we maintain the front end as a service. They never touch the front end. They never look at the front end. And they can now use the functionality of that front end and customize it, modify it, make it exactly what they need it to be. And I could see people build, just instead of building templates or themes, you build whole businesses in a box that you may support as a small business, as an agency, building these types of things. So the complexity of code will continue to be abstracted. And I think that the potential for building these experiences is what's going to be distributed widely. And this is a big chunk of the front end, because the front end is what people touch, right? If we go back to the visual software, this is what people touch. Right? This is the only thing, the interaction point with the community. So when you talk about people, when you talk about the connection point with the human, this is where they interact with your software. So what happens on the back end is irrelevant to them. What's that experience on the front end? And this is where I think we can offer value as creators, as artists, as people who are in touch with what our user might want at the end of the day. Artificial intelligence. This is the year. It's all breaking out, right? Last year we saw the launch of ChatGPT. Maybe that was, no, I guess that was last year. But this year it's coming. GPT-4 is going to come. It's just going to get better. Maybe soon it starts learning from itself. If you think about how a baby learns, you know, nobody programs a baby. A baby has a little bit of learning through interacting with the world. It slowly develops a mental model for what the world is and how it can interact in that world. And who knows if we just had a baby in artificial intelligence, and it might take it 20 years to grow up. But I think we just had the baby and head of. Now you're all experts. Imagine, I just saw an article, it passed I forget the name of the school, but a master's level course, MBA level course, the final exam. Just passed it, flying colors. It's solving problems that the people who built it didn't even think it could solve. And so you now have access at your fingertips. If you're not sitting at your desk with a ChatGPT window and just have that there as a free expert, you know, like you're missing out. And so how do you take these things? So you still have to optimize it for the human. You see the people that are actually taking advantage of this, they're taking the API of ChatGPT and they're building something cool on top for a small niche of people, right? They find their small group of people and they say, okay, these people need to use it just like this for this one instance. Let's narrowly target the way this thing works and give them a user experience that meets that need. And then they pay for the API, it's game on. Right? So they're not even building the technology anymore. So you have to stop thinking, I have to build the tech. I have to build the thing. I have to build it all from scratch. You don't. You have to go find the pieces and figure out how to assemble them in a way that makes sense for the people you want to sell this to. And those people that you want to sell this to does not have to be that big an audience. And this is the biggest one I think that's coming too that's undervalued. AI is cool, but we have to go back to the people layer. And so what I think is more interesting is what's happening in the crypto space that's nobody talking about. I'm not a crypto evangelist. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm not somebody that's like super like stuck up about crypto. What I see happening in this space though is that groups are able to define what they create, how that value is measured, and how they transact that value with other groups that also have values that they measure and want to transact with other people. Now, for example, Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these coins that exist now are networks of people that have basically gotten the value of whatever they think that Bitcoin is worth against the dollar. There's an exchange rate that's set by the market. Okay, that's one value. But what if you have a Webflow design group, or what if you have a designer who wants to trade with a lawyer or an architect, right? And they're just trading time. They're trading their services. They're trading their brain power. Who says that they have to make that transaction with a tool that the government says is money, right? Why can they not find a way to barter? If you go back to the early days of barter, barter became difficult because, let's say I had sheep, you had apples, another guy had bananas, and the guy who has the sheep wants bananas, but the guy who has apples wants the sheep, and the guy who has, the guy who has the bananas wants the apples. So they don't want from each other. You got to like figure out how to rotate and create this infinite market, which was impossible, right? And so you create money, because then money becomes a mechanism of exchange. Okay, you trade the apples for the money, then I can go buy the sheep, and then they can go buy the bananas, whatever it is. But we have the modern tools. We just saw AI is growing. The technology is growing. You could build the tools. So who says we couldn't build a real-time marketplace that allows a designer to exchange value with a lawyer, and all they have to exchange is some kind of token that says, hey, I'm going to put a web design that's valued at X against this, and if a lawyer wants it and their work is valued at Y, let's trade. All right, now I don't know how the mechanics of that work, but I know it's going to happen on the back of this. I know it's going to happen on the back of crypto, and it's going to happen on the back of communities like this that figure out, hey, the value we bring to the table has nothing to do with the amount of dollars in my pocket. Because as you can see in different places, the amount of dollars that people come to the table with is very different based on where you are in the world. But that doesn't mean that the value you bring to the table is any less just because the dollars are not there, or because some other country said our dollars are worth more than yours, right? The value exchange is here and in between all of us. And so why shouldn't you be able to trade at the same rate as anybody in the world based on the value you contribute to the network you're a part of? And then as those networks grow, as those people kind of connect inside of these spaces, and that value continues to grow, imagine you could surpass what a government says their dollar is worth, or what anybody says their dollar is worth, right? Bitcoin started out as pennies. Now it's worth what? Tens of thousands. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more, whatever. But it's not worth $1. Maybe one day it'll be worth less, but whatever. Forget about an actual currency, right? Go back to the beginning of the internet. The companies that are monsters on the internet now were not exactly the ones that started before the dot-com crash, right? Lots of companies come and go. Lots of currencies will come and go, but all of these communities will have some mechanism of exchange that transacts through digital processes and through these communities that allow people to do things that they might otherwise have had to do with money or wouldn't have been able to do regardless. So there's never been a better time to monetize your output as a creative. You know, this is like point blank. When has there ever been a better time? You can make money playing video games, designing websites, showing your butt on Instagram, like literally whatever you want to do, you can make money on the internet, right? And those who stay flexible enough to find the new skill set and to figure out what it is that they can do with what they've been given in this world. Because not all of us are given the things that we need to survive in the world that exists today, but we've all been given something, right? There's some skill set inside of each of us that we can take out into the world, and we can turn through these tools into a value exchange that puts money in our bank accounts. We've got these metal boxes that sit in front of us, and if you learn to touch them the right way, they will feed you. That's crazy. Never before has that been possible, right? And there's a growing divide, this is the last one, between those who get it and those who don't. And like I said, you guys are at the front edge of this wave. One of the cool things I like that's happening in this community is that when people break out, they don't shut the door behind them. More often than not, what they do is they build a ramp. You know, and they say, hey, let me show you, right? When I build in Webflow and I do something amazing, clone this, learn from this. Come to the meetup, let me show you. Let me sit with you and teach you. This is also a new thing. You know, businesses have never been built around a sharing of information or of value or of saying, with anybody other than the people at top, right? The execs, yeah, they get all the value. But the people who do the work, where are they? And now what we're seeing is these businesses are kind of shifting and they're being built in a new way, and maybe you could be the ones that build the next thing, that build something interesting. So ask yourself these questions as you go through. This is going to be the takeaway, and then we'll jump into the questions. So how can you improve the user experience at every step, right? Forget about the technology. Let the technology fade away. The technology just has to work. That's the only thing, right? People expect that. It's no longer about like, my app is this, my app is that, and you build some clunky thing. And, the app needs to work, right? But how do you improve the user experience at every step? Oftentimes, you don't even need the software to start doing that. right? That can be about the community. That can be about interactions. That can be about just finding a way to solve people's problems and faking the technology until the technology can catch up. Because remember, the technology's coming and it'll fade. So what you need to be good at is making connections and building community around those connections, which is the next step. What can I do to build community around my product or service? This could be an agency. This can be a freelance operation. This can be a hobby that you have. This doesn't have to be like a for-profit thing. This can just be a thing you like to do. But building that community becomes the first step to figuring out how to transact value at a scale larger than money, right? I don't know how to quantify the value of flying across the world to do something like this. There's no dollars that could pay for the value of what is happening inside of this room, right? And so those are things that soon we will be able to quantify at some level. I don't know how, but soon. How can they help me stand out? So you've already seen, by being in this room, you're ahead of the curve. So what can you do after this to really, is it learning a course? Is it maybe you're good enough with the tech and you want to learn how to sell better? Maybe you want to grow your agency and set up some processes or systems. I don't know what it is, but find a way to take these and differentiate yourself from what's happening all around you. And then find ways that generate attention. This is the gold. This is the new money. This is the only money that matters, attention. This is why they're all fighting over advertising dollars. Advertising is almost a $1 trillion industry annually. It's crazy. Advertising last year was $857 billion industry. The creator economy was like 120 billion, I'm sorry. So you have almost 900 billion in the advertising industry versus 100 billion in the creative services and the creator economy. What if you could find a way to take, because the creators are the ones that do all the things that the advertisers pay for. So what if you found a way to take those $800 billion and shove them from interrupting people into this creator economy that allowed us to monetize the things that we do, because we are the ones that power the internet, right? We're the people who build the things that people interact with on the web. But we're not the ones that take the value of the web. Who takes the value? Google, Facebook, Twitter, all these different companies, right? But what are they doing? They're stepping in between you and the attention of the people you're interacting with. And then they charge you to reach that audience. But we're building the tech now. So that means you need to figure out how to build the attention. And then from there, you figure out the professional and the personal growth. What does it take to do the things you want to do? Does that mean my daily activities align with my desired outcome? You know, maybe it does. Maybe I'm a freelancer and what I'm doing is I want to have the freedom to travel the world. Cool, your activities align. Your goal is not to grow a business past a certain level or to become the next Bill Gates. But if your goal is to build the next software platform and you're spending half a day in bed and then partying at all hours and you never actually set the time to do the work, well, then those activities are not supporting those end goals. And so just making sure that those goals are aligned with what you actually think you want to do and then what you're capable of doing based on your skill set and current kind of situation. So I'll end with this. To follow the path that others have laid before you is a reasonable course of action. Therefore, all progress is made by unreasonable men. This is one of my favorite quotes. This Steve Jobs. So we all have a path in front of us that we could take. And the path that we could take is the path that the world says we should take. This is the path that your parents put you on. This is the path that the schools say you're on. This is the path that the world says this is how the world works. But all of us are sitting in this room knowing that that is not how things work anymore. Right? Everything we know about how the world works over the next 20 years is going to be rewritten. Every single rule is going to be rewritten. How we transact value, how we learn. College will be obsolete in how many years? Like if you have a thing like ChatGPT, why do you need to go to college and memorize all of these things? Just like when we were in school, when I was in school, our teachers told us you'll never have a calculator with you. Yeah, here it is, right? Always. And so what thing will we think we not have now or that we need now that in 5 years, 10 years will not be relevant? And so this is the path you have to choose. But I'm telling you that the path to step away from that path, because this is a nice path. It's paved, it's beautiful. There's restaurants on the side, there's bars over here. It's an easy walk to take this path. This is the path that the world says is for you. To take this other path is to go down the dark alley, right? It's to go down uncharted territory. It's to have to take your machete and cut through the bush. And that's a hard path. You're gonna find obstacles. You're gonna find nature and wildlife and crazy shit over there that you just don't know how to deal with. And it's your path to figure that out. And I think that's what we're all here for. I'm excited to help you all on that path and figure out how these tools can play into that. And I hope you guys, this has inspired you just a little bit. And I'd love to just chat, ask questions, and talk about whatever after this. Cheers. Yeah, open floor. Yeah.
So how do you see web mobility in the next years?
I see this happening a lot all over the world. I think Webflow community has mostly been focused on the US for a while. And I think that there's pockets of it kind of flourishing in other places, but still mostly focused on meetups and things that happen in a specific time zone, whether that's West Coast or Mountain or Eastern time US. So I just see more things kind of expanding outside of that time zone. And I see leaders developing in other places that see what we've been able to do maybe in the US and some of these communities, and they're going to run and grow and build way bigger markets than we have. Like the meetups that we have sometimes, 10 or 15 people, like to get a meetup like this in my market would be unheard of, you know? And so I see one of the best ways you can actually stand out in the community is to start your own little group. And it doesn't have to be big. Start with 2 or 3 people. My first meetups, we'd have 1 or 2 people come by and we'd sit there and we'd learn. So I see a lot of that happening. I would love to see bigger events, you know, like States of Flow happening all over, Webflow comps happening in Europe or Australia or down here in South America or wherever. I think that's the next chapter. I know that's what they're focused on, and that's what we're also focused on and figuring out how we can do more of this.
How do you see this community growing in Latin America?
If I have anything to do with it, vamos a practicar el español un poquito más y vamos a regresar. Pero ustedes, la responsabilidad es de ustedes. A coger lo que está pasando aquí y, you know, take off. Like, don't wait for permission. Don't wait for Webflow to give you permission to say, oh, we're going to pay for that or we're going to do that. Like, find a way to do it and just run with it. I think Latin America, just in general, with tech, with everything, is a huge emerging market potential. So you guys have, and again, I think about like, we hardly get exposed to this. Like I never got exposed to a lot of this stuff growing up. I can imagine the public education systems down here are doing a lot of exposing people to this type of tech. So finding ways to, again, if you make it, bring someone with you. If you do something cool, host a workshop, record a video, translate the stuff into your language. If you can speak English well enough to translate this stuff into Spanish, I mean, this is what Edgar Allan's doing with the Webflow Cafe, right? Find a way to just penetrate that market. And again, Pablo, where is he? The tweet that I sent, I don't know, he told me yesterday when we were hanging out that I replied to some random tweet of his before he joined Edgar Allan. And he said, I don't know, something. I said, oh, we'll see where we meet up, or who knows where this will go, or like, and here we are 2 years later in Argentina. So you never know. And the little contact that you make, the little connection on Twitter, the answer to a forum, just immerse yourself wherever you can, and you never know where the roads are going to lead you. But just be genuine too.
On that question, if the US has a recession, fund costs like they have lately, I think that could give like a huge boost to Latin America, just in terms of saving costs. We're there, right? We have similar time zones like New York City, Miami.
Correct.
So I think it will be like a good opportunity now, just not to leave it behind.
Correct.
Because once the economy recovers, like 1-2 years, they'll be maybe shifted away, but I think it's a good opportunity right now.
Yeah, well, the thing is, once the door's open, it's very difficult to close it.
Yeah.
And there's so much opportunity and potential here that I think, especially because of the time zone alignment, to figure out partnerships and ways to attack that market. The other thing I see growing is people finding resources. Like I'm here with a friend, and we were talking about how do we create education to not just teach English and these skills, but to then how to navigate the Western markets, the US markets, how to position yourself to land those clients, the higher paying clients, and not have to maybe outsource it to some agency or to somebody else who then plays middleman and still keeps a ton of the value, you know? And so how do you create that shift where you, as an international based operation, can still participate on a global scale at peak value rather than at the middle or the bottom of the tier? So yeah, and a lot of things are going to change with the recession, because who knows what this recession is going to be or how big it's going to be or whether it's just constrained to one market or not. And yeah, never let a good never let a good crisis go to waste, I think is yeah. So yeah, find a way to take advantage of whatever chaos comes.
Yeah. So as technology is shifting, we tend to switch our ways. So with this new technology, do you think that we're gonna like fade away from websites to other things like that happened with television? Right now, it's not kind of using it. So
Sure.
what do you think is the next?
You still use the TV, you just use it different, right? So the TV is just a screen. The phone is just a screen. Right? Your computer is just a screen. The way we access the internet is through URLs, right? And so you have to, like, everything has to have a name on the internet for you to be able to type it in and go to a place. So yeah, I think with like voice results and stuff, you may get more dynamic things where it starts feeding you, like a search result 0, where it's just one result, like a chat GPT. It's just going to give you the answer. It's not going to show you a bunch of websites. However, I do think that the value that we create on the internet, just like real estate in the real world, will be limited, right, by some capacity, right? And I don't mean that arbitrarily, like there's just going to be a certain number of URLs, but there will be a certain number of URLs that become interesting, right? And so if you think about what a media company is, a media company, let's say the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever the top media company here is, it's just a URL on the internet where everyone behind that wall or under that entity publishes content that all the tech can come and scrape under that URL, and that becomes clout. That's what a media company is. And if you go back to the gaining attention, that's how they gain attention, right? Because they play the game of aggregating as much quality information as they can behind the wall of a URL. And so, yes, the internet may change and websites may not always be what they are today, but you will still need an address on the internet to go access whatever thing is that you're creating. And those networks that create those things will become the new arbiters of how you exchange value through the internet. And so those nodes I could see, for instance, imagine in a local community. Imagine we have a little local network, and because I live in this community, when I go to a restaurant and I pay with my card, I get a 10% discount. But you who doesn't live in the community comes and you pay a 10% premium, and the prices are dynamic. And that could be a value exchange that, again, is just powered by this little community. And we all work together to, again, to build the value behind that so that people can learn about where to come and where to explore. And instead of then going to Yelp, you come to our little home to figure out where the people here do the thing, because that's the unique experience. That's the localized experience. And then those networks could daisy chain in an interesting way. And now you can trade value. When I go to your community, now I can trade at 10% because I've found a way to exchange value. So you still need a door into this thing. The website we see may not be exactly the same, from like a menu here, there, whatever. Maybe it'll be an markets because there's price points you have to hit. Are you talking about like the cost for some of the solutions, or having to have all the different subscriptions for this service and that service and that service to then build what you need inside of Webflow? Is that what you mean? To then offload that? I think that the technology has to evolve a little bit. And I think we need to find ways to offer some parity pricing. Yeah, that's going to become an interesting challenge as all these tech companies continue to grow. They're going to continue to want to raise their prices, and then that always becomes a problem of going back to how does the value exchange evenly from one place to another. I don't know. I think Webflow is leading the charge. I think if Webflow is not the front end for most of the internet in the next 5 years, they probably screwed something up pretty big. But that's not to say that another company couldn't come out with something amazing and just blow them out of the water. I don't know. I don't think, like I never say that one person's going to be or something's going to be, but they're so far ahead with what you can do and the flexibility and the customizability. I've made this analogy a million times, but I really see Webflow as the iOS versus BlackBerry, WordPress being BlackBerry. And if you remember when iPhone first came out, it was just a toy, and most of the world ran on BlackBerry. All the enterprise solutions were BlackBerry. And when people saw this toy, they're like, oh, that's just a toy. Us business people who are making money, we're over here with the BlackBerry. And then iPhone opened up the App Store, and we all know what happened from there. And I think Webflow is in the toy stage of what they're building. They're iOS pre-App Store, and WordPress is BlackBerry. And when Webflow figures out how to open up the back end so that anybody can come and build plugins and easily integrate and talk to the database and things like DevLink, where you can then export the full code, build with a back end, and that you don't have to have any of those dependencies anymore, right? And so that's where I think we're just still so early to this that once that ecosystem opens up, and that could be another 2 years to really make it happen. But once that happens, it's going to be explosive and off to the races. That's why I keep going back to we're so early. Like you guys don't have any idea how early we are. So as an example, WordPress makes up something like 45% of all websites that use like a CMS. It's like 65% of all websites that use a CMS, which is like 45% of the entire internet. Webflow, on the other hand, is like 0.6% of the internet. And growing exponentially, if you go to Built With and you look at the stats, Webflow's monthly growth of new sites versus WordPress is almost double. And so who knows how much of that is legacy sites and blah, 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 and how long it'll take for any of that to shift. But even if Webflow gets to 1, 2, 3, 4%, imagine how big a growth that would be. Imagine if they got to 10% of that, like how much there is still to grow. So yeah, this is just ridiculously early. I wanted to go back to your question about the URLs too. There's one thing I see, and I'd be remiss to say it because this is a project I'm working on. I think the ability to connect the web properties we build with each other. If you think about how the web works right now, it's all Facebook, right? It's a feed of content, or Twitter, or TikTok, or whatever it is. It's just a feed of content. Well, when I get to my website and I see your content, it's just the content, and then I get to the bottom of your blog post and it's over. And maybe you put like a little recommended article, but it's like, what do I do with this, right? Where do I go? So imagine if we found ways to start connecting these web properties that we were building and then daisy chaining them together so that when I created a piece of content, maybe it showed up on your site. And then when you created a piece of content, it showed up on my site. And slowly we started daisy chaining these pieces of the internet together to replicate what a large scale media company could be. And imagine the networks and the systems and the SEO signals you could give if 50, 100, 1,000 websites in one region or across the world started talking about the same thing and then sharing content, sharing traffic, doing some of these things that are kind of already profitable business models that media companies use. But again, empowering the end user, dealing with the connection to the human, and adding value to the experience as opposed to trying to interrupt you to then sell you something down the road.
Yeah, there's an interesting case, for example, in China. There's like a store that uses like live stream, give you a website storage. There's like a bad guy that is like, it's like a store, but it's online.
Yeah.
So I think we're slowly transitioning to more like the contact between the human and the technology is like merging.
Correct.
I think that's one
Correct.
of the things in the future.
Yeah.
Merge the human contact, because now you see a website, it's just a text, right? But what if you can speak to you or it can respond to you like Alexa or something like that?
Or it could just be a live portal. Who says the website's not just a live feed that, you know, we've experimented this where it's a live lobby. And as people come in, I greet them personally. It's like, hey, what's up? And I'm in the box in the corner and I'm working. But, you know, you can see people and they can hit a little button and then boom, you're in a Zoom chat or you're in a live chat or you're like, imagine the immersive experience. And then what if you could travel with that to different websites? So what if you could have a squad of people and the next thing you know, let's say we have this community here and Webflow is doing their live watch party. What if over top of their live stream, we could have a little window where we're chatting and whatever, and it's a separate group, just private to us. You know, so there's all these immersive experiences that you could blend in and take the good parts of social media and the good parts of websites. And again, just kick out the people in the middle who are stealing all the attention and then monetizing it themselves, and use the same mechanisms to drive that revenue back to us, the people who are building the things. And I think all you got to do is shift the incentive structure just a tiny little bit inside the game. You know, if you're familiar with The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, he talks about these habit loops and how to create real innovation, you can't disrupt the habit loop, because it's almost impossible to get humans to adapt new behaviors like this. It takes a long time. But if you can step into that habit loop and you can offer just a little bit of value around the edge of that, then you can adopt the habit loop and you can fit into people's habit loops. And I think we already have a habit loop around how we search for information, how we transact business, how we share content, how we build websites. The habit loop interaction that needs to change is the incentives. So all we have to do is realign the incentives around this habit loop about how we interact with the internet to stop pumping the money outside and away from the creators and back into the circle itself. And you watch how this habit loop of people who create and build things on the internet starts to explode, and the value of the people who create that skyrockets. And that's what I think is the next phase of all this. How are we on time? One more?
Yeah, so one question. So what do you see as front-end opportunities or opportunities to build a front-end with workflow, whatever it is, and connecting it with ChatGPT or GPT?
Yeah.
I've seen things like Excel Formula Bot, which just helps people generate formulas essentially. But it'd be interesting to see what you might think.
Yeah, I think that anything you can do with an API, you'll be able to build a front end with it with these tools and connect the dots. I think the front end as a service is just an industry that started out. If you want, we did a full episode, I don't remember what number it was on the FinSuite stream. There's a whole front end as a service episode where we dive into the details of that, like how I see that evolving. Yeah, I think that's the future actually. Because you could then offer a back-end service, and let's say you're a creative person who understands this back-end service and you want to service restaurants or gyms or doctor's offices or whatever your niche business is, you could build a bunch of front-end things with the same back-end and then offer these customized experiences out of the box that don't need to be built one-off for each person. So you could then start to build a business that serves 10,000 roofers, let's say, with one back-end and 50 front ends that you want it to look like this, you want it to look like the New York Times, you want it to look like that. What do you want and so I could see instead of template makers, there will be whole front end business in a box makers that will just build the front ends. They'll learn how to navigate these APIs and all these other tools and bring in the back end functionality that you need and pass that all through. And it'll just, I don't know when, it could be a year or two, it could be 5, but that's what's coming.
What do you believe that it's not seeing that
What do I see that others don't?
what do you believe that this tech not seeing that? I have talked with developers.
I think, again, going back to the habit loop, I think most people who write code on the front end or who are software developers or not technically savvy, they dismiss this as just like somebody who used to make shoe horses dismiss the car, you know, and they're going to miss an entire industry. Just like Blockbuster got dusted by Netflix. I don't know if that's an analogy that fits here, but they're going to get left behind, right? So there's a sequence of events that happens in a change cycle where you have you see something like self-driving cars, for instance. You know, we've been hearing about self-driving cars for a long time. And maybe you've even seen a car driving on the road that has like radar on it or it has some kind of like sensor device. And you've seen it like, okay, hey, that's kind of a self-driving car. And you write it off as like, okay, they're working on that. And then one day you look around and half the cars around you are just driving themselves. And you're like, shit, it happened. Right? And you don't even know. And I think that's going to happen a lot in tech, where there's a lot of people who have invested so much in the skill set that it takes to build this stuff from scratch that they're not willing to dismiss that easily because they think it can happen, because they think you can do it. They're like, oh, you didn't struggle as hard as I did, so therefore your skills are not as good as mine. And so they're going to miss it. And I don't know what that means for them. I don't know if that means they can't catch up. I don't know if that means they're going to get left in the dust. But I do know it creates opportunities for us who are on the front end and understand the power of what's coming here to maximize that going forward. Yeah. Cool. Okay, is that it? Antes de que se vayan, I want to take a little shot. Let's do it from right here. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you all so much. I'll be around all day. We can chat as much as you want.
Pasamos ahora al break. Pueden acá beber, también charlar, conocerte, presentarte.
Wow. Hey.